Hello and welcome to this conversation at the Delphi Forum. My name is Florian Eder. I'm, among other things, the author of Politico's daily morning email briefing called Brussels Playbook. And I am pleased and honored that I have today the European Commission's Vice President for promoting the European way of life with me, Mαργαρίτης Σχοινάς. Welcome, Vice President. Welcome, Mαργαρίτης. We are very glad that you could make it while you actually had to leave the college meeting, the weekly college meeting early. But I trust it will all go well even without you in the last remaining time, right?
Yes, I left when the essential business was done, so rest assured. I was not going to miss this appointment, Florian. Thank you for having me.
Mαργαρίτης, your vast portfolio includes security, sports, it includes culture, religious affairs, religion, but most importantly, topically in these weeks, of course, it's migration. We are all awaiting, Brussels is awaiting, and Europe is awaiting new proposals from the European Commission under your steermanship, under your oversight, on how to resolve the puzzle that has been haunting almost Europe for the past 5 years. That is how to solve the migration issue, how to how to gap a deep divide that we have seen over the past 5 years. I'd like to start to talk a little bit about this. What makes you confident in atmosphere that this time it could work, that you can come up with something that works for everybody, because that is what is eventually needed, a solution in migration that works for countries from Greece and Malta to Denmark and Eastern Europe, such as Poland. So what has changed?
Well, you are absolutely right in saying that this is one of the most emblematic initiatives of this current Commission. One thing is certain, is that Europe needs a holistic, comprehensive policy for migration and asylum. What we're having now is a mix of perpetual crisis management and a regulatory patchwork of different solutions that produce different results. This cannot go on. We need now a single framework, a holistic one. Of course, we have the experience of 2016 when we tried, but that was also in a way a pedagogical experience, because we can draw the lessons of this failure and use them as ingredients for this new fresh start. The main lesson being that at the time, which was at the height of the refugee crisis, we pushed very clearly for the solidarity element of the package, but we were not yet ready on the responsibility elements, which was the external dimension, relations with third countries, countries of origin and transit, and the management of our external borders with a robust European border and coast guard. Now I think we can claim reasonably that the responsibility elements are being beefed up so that the solidarity dimension can be addressed to those who at the time had problems with more arguments, that we can now police our borders, we can have good relations with countries of origin and transit, so we can claim responsibility for the countries of first entry. A final point that I want to emphasize, always comparing to the 2016 experience, which, as you know, I lived very close to my previous life, it would be a huge mistake if our member states revisit their red lines in 2016. Then we risk repeating the same mistake. Europe cannot fail twice on such an important file. So what we will put on the table will be different from the 2016, but will address all dimensions that are conducive to a solution. So there will be something for everybody there. And my hope is that this would be a solid basis on which the German presidency would start work in earnest.
You say that there's a new focus and there's new readiness to police the external borders of Europe, so to help these countries of first entry and not leave them alone. But the state of play there is that the EU's Coast and Border Guard will be beefed up by 2027 only. So how can you credibly promise that actually something has changed when it comes to protecting the EU's external borders?
Well, what Frontex was looking like in 2016 is not comparable to how Frontex looks now. As you know, we have a reinforced mandate. They have many more responsibilities and many more resources. They will be indeed building up this standing corps of 10,000 border guards and coast guards from now to 2014, so 27. We'll see, depending on where the MFF negotiation will settle. But undoubtedly, we are beefing up this capacity already now. Frontex will recruit 700 people already this year and more next year. So we can claim that our capacity to police our external border is significantly improved compared to 2016. And one should not forget also the so-called Evros experience, which we had at the beginning of March when we had a situation, an emergency situation on our external border, and there, with immediate reaction, both political and operational, we were able to help Greece as a frontline member state, not only with Frontex resources, but with ad hoc contributions from material, from the Commission and other member states. So I'm confident that this capacity for external borders management will be significantly beefed up in the weeks, months, and years to come.
Would that also include that decisions of who gets protection in the European Union and in EU countries are taken at the external borders and then possibly at some point by EU staffers, by EU staff?
Well, it's always politically risky now to advance on the content of the pact proposal, which will be unveiled shortly. So I will resist the temptation to do that. What I can say is, of course, in this new system that we're envisaging, the mere fact that there will be a holistic EU policy for migration and asylum means that from the moment one arrives at the EU's external border, something has to happen. This is not something that, as it is now the case, will be left to the authorities of the country of first reception. We need to organize a comprehensive structure where EU agencies and EU rules apply from the very first moment, that allow us to distinguish very quickly who is eligible for asylum, who is likely to obtain asylum, and who is not and will have to be returned. So all this will be part as a single European comprehensive framework and will be reflected in the pact.
It almost sounds as if that would be the Hamilton moment that we've heard so often about in the past weeks. Is that something that you would subscribe to?
Well, I think all analogies with American federalism always have an element of risk. I will try to put it differently. We have the biggest and the better regulated market in the world. We have the second global common currency in the world. It's for me unthinkable that Europe has not have yet a single migratory framework policy. It's mind-blowing. And the moment has come. This is the moment. And I think also the post-pandemic realities are conducive to such a moment. Now we can call it Hamiltonian, we can call it Big Bang moment, federal moment, but we need it. And I'm not, as you know, I'm not new in European politics. I know that this will be a very tough negotiation. It will be a very difficult negotiation. But I repeat that the moment has come for this new deal on migration, and the moment is now.
Will there be mandatory relocation included? I'll try again.
Nice try, Florian. I think if you see the pact as a three-story building, the first floor would be the external dimension, relations with the countries of origin and transit. The second would be the robust common management of our external border. And the third would be the solidarity element. Now, as I was saying earlier, for the third floor to be solid, the first and the second this time need to be solid too. And how the third floor will be constructed internally, which is one of the, I would say, the most sensitive parts of the proposal, I prefer at this stage to discuss a system of permanent solidarity. So we would need to have a system of permanent solidarity, of permanent effective solidarity. So this will cover both the post-Dublin reality, which we desperately need, but that should also cover crisis situation when frontline member states, countries of first entry, would be required to get help immediately. So you still have to trust us with the final fine-tuning, but let's stay with the term permanent effective solidarity.
We're all very curious about what that will mean in the end. Last question on this: is it going to be a legislative proposal this time, or more a roadmap now, and then with the legislative proposals coming later?
Commissioner Johansson and I have consulted extensively, have traveled to all European capitals. We have discussed with political groups in the European Parliament, and I think our interest would be to put together a full package with legislative proposals now to allow the work to start immediately, and if necessary, we may need to space out certain proposals to come later, but I think that the bulk of the proposals would have to come from the start.
And it will be ready in time for, as you said before, the German presidency to work on it from day one, so by the end of June.
Yes, I think this pact we also discussed amongst ourselves, and this is a discussion that is still going on with capitals, but I think the German presidency, in our view, would be in a better situation to advance work by having this package on their table at the beginning rather than later. So July better than September, if you ask me.
I'd like to move on a little bit. You mentioned the lessons learned from the Corona crisis before. If you look at the Commission and the Commission's performance, you were the Commission as a whole and the President were accused, including by the press and by us, of not acting very decisively, sometimes of acting late, of doing too little, and of appearing weak in, admittedly, a crisis that is not that does not fully fall under its responsibilities and competencies when it comes to the health crisis. But still, the reaction to the sometimes chaotic reactions by single member states, for many, was not did not produce an image of strength and force and power. If you as you know, the previous Commission, as well as only a few other people, can I lure you into trying to compare the two commissions? Would the Juncker Commission have reacted differently to, for example, rather chaotic border closures between different European countries?
The main difference, I think, between the Juncker Commission and the von der Leyen Commission is the Juncker Commission was shaped, its legacy was shaped by a degree of permanent crisis. Juncker called them mini crisis. Whereas in this Commission, in our first 6 months of the mandate, we had 3 months of fair weather and calmer waters, and 3 months of probably the deepest and the biggest crisis Europe saw since the end of World War II. And answering your question, I would say that many people, or rather some people, including probably the publication you know well, were quite quick to undermine or to underestimate, rather, this commission. And I think that we proved you wrong in a way, because both in the 3 early months of the fair weather, we were able to do a very aggressive start with the Green Deal proposals, with the 5G toolbox proposals, with the artificial intelligence proposals. So we front-loaded this transition to greener and digital Europe. And then in the 3 months of troubled waters, we managed the impossible. We managed a very bumpy, uncoordinated starts where our governments, under the pressure of this pandemic, each one tried to organize as best they could. But we were instrumental, I think, in taking them out of this lack of coordination, first through convergence with specific measures on border, on common tenders of public, on personal protective equipment, on organizing convergence and work, and finally with a historic Hamiltonian proposal on the recovery fund that showed that only the Commission has this unique blend of technical charisma and political opportunity that can make a difference. So, to cut a long story short, I think we proved, this Commission so far proved a hard nut to crack. And this shows both in the face of calmer waters and in the crisis. Well, of course, we have 4 years and a half ahead of us, but I feel very confident and very proud of this start, which I think was the right one.
Technical charisma is a very nice your most recent creation. It's very good. If I can offer a slightly different story, as short, if you look at the proposals for the recovery fund that you just mentioned, they were basically lined out in a few days before by the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the French President Emmanuel Macron. What does that tell us about the strength and the power of the Commission and where power lies in Europe? If you have to wait for Germany and France to propose something, to make it yours and to own it.
I think that only good things can happen to Europe when France and Germany agree on big issues. So I'm not dogmatic, and I'm not participant in any turf wars or wars of influence. What matters here is, and if I can take you a bit earlier from the Franco-German agreement, we had for weeks around the first meetings of the Eurogroup a public spat. Everybody was disagreeing with everybody, as you can remember, on the form of the response, or how to kickstart the economy, bonds, no bonds, debt, no debt. So this was a sequence, and we are used in Europe in these sequences where we start with a public fight, then we understand the limits of these disagreements, then we start working together, and then we come up with a solution. So this was, again, a very European crisis in its outlook. But I think that when the moment came for the Commission to come forward with our proposal, that had the best of everything. Had the lessons drawn from the disagreements. It creamed out the Franco-German agreement, but also had elements, as you have seen, that go beyond the Franco-German agreement. So I don't see it as an antithetic process. I see it as a consensual contributing process that leads to good decisions, good proposals.
Are you concerned that this north-south divide that you just mentioned is coming back in the corona crisis?
I I have this feeling that much will depend on how these two big negotiations would go in the months to come. One on the recovery package and the other on the migration pact. These are major negotiations, defining moments for the Union. If you listen to society, if you look what people expect from Europe, this is clearly a universal request for the European economy to kickstart fast with the help of the European Union budget, and for the European Union to have a comprehensive migration policy. So I'm aware of the difficulties. I know that there will be many cleavages around these negotiations, but I'm convinced that we get both negotiations right.
Do we need to develop a health union, or maybe somebody like Jens Spahn, the German health minister, put it slightly differently in an interview yesterday, something like a NATO for health? Is that one of the lessons learned?
Yes, I think one of the lessons learned, and you will find lots of it in our recovery package, is that we have to bridge this asymmetry between what people, Europeans, expect from Europe in areas where Europe does not have much in terms of competence or resources. This is something, again, that shaped the way people saw Europe at the early stage of the pandemic. And clearly, health, education, tourism, these are areas that the pandemic clearly profiled as areas where we should do more. So yes, I do agree that we need a health union, what Emmanuel Macron called, together with Chancellor Merkel in their press conference, une Europe de la santé. This is not only the new self-standing program that we presented last week that brings the EU resources from 400 million to 10 billion, but this also is the beginning of a call for greater EU strategic autonomy in this area, for health sovereignty. I like the term that Jens Spahn used, NATO, a NATO treaty for health, but I think we should proceed by stages. What matters is that this health sovereignty that Europe needs is becoming a reality and goes beyond words. We will be tested whether this drive of EU sovereignty on health will emerge when the vaccine will come, or how the vaccine will come. This will be tested again in our new pharmaceutical strategy to make sure that pharmaceutical industry can produce what we need. And it will be tested again when we have to revisit our industrial and production model to see why at these critical moments Europe did not have masks or ventilators or paracetamol. All these things would have to be part of the new Europe de la santé that will be coming ahead of us.
Well, President, I'd like to come to one last topic. The European way of life, as we saw it over the past month, was also, across EU countries, to be very disciplined as long as there was need for. Actually, what we've seen in the past weeks, days, actually, is that life comes back, including public political life, as demonstrations against what happened in the US, the murder of George Floyd, for example. Is there, do you think, a need for a new awareness in Europe that there's racial discrimination is also an issue for us? Haven't we been enough aware of this?
There is no doubt that Europe as a whole has been doing better than the United States in issues of race, also because we have better systems for social inclusion, protection, universal healthcare, and this allows our societies to be more resistant. And there is also a European tradition for protecting minorities. We have less issues than they have in the States. this being so does not mean that we do not have some way still to go in terms of fostering equality and inclusion, income distribution. All these are issues that Europe has still to address. When it comes to the European level, you know that we have tabled, the Commission, years ago, an equality directive that has been stuck in the Council and Parliament, has not advanced, which is regrettable. So our European way of life clearly is the best shield that can protect tolerant, open, and inclusive societies. But this does not mean that we do not have to complete this process and strive to do better things. The fact that we are better than the Americans in this does not mean that we do not have some way to go yet.
Do I understand you correctly that you're taking responsibility also for this to develop this, to advance this in due course?
No, because this is not in my mission letter. I do know that the equality is with my colleague Vera Jourova and Helena Dalli. But I am well familiar with this equality directive because as a member of the European Parliament at the time, I broke the party whip, and I was, I think, one of the 2 or 3 members of the European People Party that voted in favor at the time. So I'm personally committed to this, and I will continue in my new capacity to strive for this.
Vice President Mαργαρίτης Σχοινάς, we have to wrap it up here. I hear we ran out of time way more quickly than we imagined, and it was a very lively conversation. Many thanks for this. Many thanks for joining us, and to the Delphi Forum, of course, for hosting our conversation here between 2 people actually being in Brussels rather than in beautiful Greece. But I will very much hope that we will have the opportunity to do the same thing physically and in person next year or whenever we have the occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florian, and I take it on me that next year this will be done physically in Delphi, and I will show you also the Temple of Apollo, which is an unforgettable experience for someone who had studied humanities as you did.